So I got to tell you, one of the interesting stories, as I said earlier, for me is the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, actually began an investigation today into the perfect phone call, another perfect phone call where, just go out and find me somewhere around 12,000 votes. I just find that a moment where we can have some unity, where as a country we can come together around, hey, you know what? It wasn't a perfect phone call. It was bribery. It was intimidation. It was all of the things that we don't want elected leaders to do. So we'll see. We'll see what Brad comes up with and the folks there in Georgia. Going to be an interesting couple of months. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. One of my favorite reporters over at RawStory, our good friend Matthew Chapman. Matthew, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be back, Rick.
So what do you think? I'm looking at this as a potential. There's potential for the Republican Party to cleanse their soul and get rid of Trump and hold somebody accountable for what they're doing.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to note that the investigation is in very early stages right now. So basically, officials in Georgia are stressing that it is more of a fact-finding mission right now than criminal charges. However, I will say that they definitely have not ruled out criminal charges depending on what they find.
Right. Now, for me, just the mere fact that they're opening an investigation is an enormous leap, because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah, and, it's not every day that you see a president of the United States get investigated for this kind of thing. Because, it's not often that you see a president call up a Secretary of State and demand that he find extra votes.
Yeah, I mean, that's
and then say that it'll be bad news for them and their lawyer if they don't.
Yeah, because they're going to send Vinny down with the baseball bat. Because it does kind of reek of that mob mentality. And I think once this story is written, in maybe 20, 30 years, once we can look back, once the passion and the anger and all this stuff is kind of calmed down a bit, that this is going to be like, The Godfather. It's going to be like, President Corleone. We're going to think about this as, he was trying to be the Don.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, Rick, because, looking at the things that he said on that phone call, it sounds exactly like the sort of thing that mob bosses say. It's stuff that in context is obviously threatening. But, if you take it out of context, take the words literally, they don't there's no specific threat being made there. So which is intended to immunize them from any sort of prosecution for their words.
Yeah, you got a pretty face there. It'd be a shame if something happened to that. But I think once we look back on it, I think that's going to be part of it. Now, obviously, the coming days, it's going to be all about impeachment, of which I've said from the beginning, we can't move forward as a country until we air our dirty laundry and we go through this process. And because, look, Republicans used to believe in responsibility and accountability and that our elected leaders should follow the same laws. This just seems like something that they should be behind, since it is their rhetoric that we're talking about.
Absolutely, Rick. I mean, Nixon didn't even need to be impeached. He was out of there, and they didn't need to hold an impeachment anyway to disqualify him for public office, because there was a sense at that time that behavior would not be tolerated by the voters. Flash forward to today, and the reason why there's such urgency to convict a president already out of office and disqualify them from office is because there is a very real chance that Republicans could run this guy again. There's a number of voters for whom, now I will say in fairness, there are plenty of Trump supporters who voted for him twice and didn't actually, and didn't know that they were voting for a full frontal assault on democracy. But there are plenty who do know and now don't care. We see that in the polls, if we don't do anything, there's every chance that he could be a front runner for the next presidential election.
Yeah, that's scary. That is scary, because here's the thing. I don't think he believes he's lost. I still, in fact, you did an article today on the fact that he doesn't believe that he's lost. In fact, he's put out a letter that refers to himself, multiple times as president. and talking about the next phase of the unconstitutional impeachment trial. But I don't know that he's moved on yet. I don't know that he's figured out he's former. Maybe he still thinks come March there's going to be another inauguration for him.
Well, it's the damnedest thing. If you look closely, you'll notice that all of his, inner circle, they don't refer to him as the former president. They refer to him as the 45th president. And it's a very pointed, deliberate thing. Like, they do believe that there's a way back in for him. And, I don't know whether Trump himself believes he'll be back in March, but there's certainly conspiracy theories circling in the QAnon community that he's going to be back there, that March 4th is going to be some secret extra inauguration for him. I don't know where they come up with this stuff anymore.
Yeah, as a guest earlier said, they've got too much time on their hands and they dream up all of this stuff. But since you brought up Q, I look at this Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I'm curious your thoughts on the kicking her off of a couple of committees. I'll be, for transparency's sake, I think it was a dumb thing for the Democrats to do. I think it was a waste of time pulling her off of those committees. That's something I think the Republicans should have done, and I think the Democrats bailed the Republican Party out. But since I've laid that out, I'm curious where you find yourself.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's clear from a moral standpoint that this woman has no business writing the legislation of our country. Now, as far as a practical standpoint, it's a little less clear, but I don't immediately think it was a mistake. See, Greene certainly seems to think it was a mistake. So she one of her last lines of defense was to threaten Democrats that if you kick me off these committees, I'm just going to be spending all that time fundraising, organizing for the Republican Party. But I think that's honestly exactly what Democrats wanted her to do, because the whole point of their incessant bringing her up and stuff, the whole point of that is to make her the brand of the Republican Party. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who are, suggesting that it's a backfire on Democrats' part because all the attention on her has allowed her to fundraise a ton of money. And it is true that it has done that. But, that's only a failure if your goal here is to turn her district blue. And let's be realistic. I think there's a chance that their district could come around and replace her with another Republican, but it is among the 10 most Republican districts in the entire country.
Yeah, it's a plus 27 district. You're not turning that blue anytime soon. But here's my problem with that argument is that her district voted for her knowing all the crazy stuff she's done. In fact, I would probably argue most of them voted for her because of the crazy stuff that she's done. So for me, it's, by taking her off of these committees for the next 2 years, you lose the opportunity to go, we need more education funding because people are so over misinformed. And look, Exhibit A right here. For me, you miss that opportunity. I think it was Hakeem Jeffries was, had a moment that went viral because, he was dressing somebody down. You're going to miss those opportunities because she's going to do dumb stuff on these committees. And for me, it also shows how little Republicans think of education and labor by putting her on those.
That's entirely possible. And, I think that, although I think to some extent that cuts to a very fundamental difference in the governing philosophy of Democrats and Republicans. Republicans like, drag down bare knuckle fights on the floor of the House, and Democrats just want to get legislation passed. And you can argue at how successful the parties are at those relative goals, but I think that is a fundamental difference in philosophy.
No, and the other part of this is, the Republicans love a martyr. And what the Democrats have done is they've made Marjorie Taylor Greene the martyr. For me, and I get all the arguments, and when I've weighed them, in my view, it just seems like in this moment, we should have been focusing all of that attention on the fact that not one Republican in the Senate voted for a rescue package that's going to help families who are struggling right now, and that the Senate is the obstruction to any progress of us getting through this economic nightmare and getting the pandemic relief that we need. That should have been the core message, and should be the message we hammer every day from now until we get something done.
Oh, well, there's absolutely no question about that, Rick. I completely agree with you. There's, in 2009, Democrats accomplished an enormous number of things that did great service to the American people, but they wasted a lot of time trying to get Republicans on board. And when it became clear they weren't as quick to point out the failures of the Republican Party to do anything that would help working people. I think we have a unique chance to not make that mistake again.
No, and that's
I think a lot of elected officials, including many who were there last time, understand that. And I don't think we're going to let it slide this time.
No, and I hope not. And I've been saying that I think Joe Biden learned the lessons of the Obama administration, and that when he came out with his number 1.9 trillion is pretty bold, and I think learned the lesson of trying to out negotiate yourself with people who are never going to come along. And that's why I'm glad to see that they're moving on the path towards budget reconciliation. Look, if we get 10 Republicans who say, yep, we're going to let this go to a cloture vote and we can go on and have a vote outside of that, great. It's what we need as a country. We desperately need something to unify us. And if giving away money to people who are struggling isn't something that can unify us, I don't know what is.
You know, what I found fascinating about the whole budget resolution that advanced today is that it included a provision for the minimum wage increase. Now, up till now, Biden has been really trying to lower our expectations on that passing. Like his expectation, he straight up said that he doesn't expect that one to survive the negotiations. And maybe it won't in the Senate. The Byrd rule is very strict, and while Democratic leaders can override it in certain ways, that would definitely be a new sort of precedent and a new sort of tactic that hasn't been seen before. But the interesting thing to me is that House Democrats are still willing to try it. They're still kicking this matter over to Senate Democrats and saying, give it your best shot.
No, and that's important because Democrats have never played that kind of hardball, at least not in my memory. Maybe you've studied this, maybe you find something. But I generally see Democrats as negotiating with themselves, starting off in negotiations saying, this is what I want, and then ending up with half of that. Instead of saying, we want something bold, we want something visionary, we want something transformational, and then maybe negotiating back to what we actually need and want. I see this as maybe that opportunity of them learning the lessons of the past.
Absolutely. And that block of Republican senators who pitched that watered down $600 billion proposal led by Susan Collins, they were clearly expecting that Democrats would do just that, because the only reason they released anything in the first place is because originally they were not going to release anything. They expected that when they said no, Democrats would just say, all right, we'll come back with something a lot smaller and see if you'll accept that. But no, they were having none of it this time. They just said, all right, if you're not going to even try, we'll get on with reconciliation. And they were like, no, wait, we'll come back to the table. Here's an actual idea. Like they figured out quickly that things are going to be a little different now.
No, and I'll tell you, I'm happy that Biden learned that lesson. I haven't really found many places where I'm disappointed with Joe Biden, but it's still early. I may, but at this moment, I'm happy that he's doing the things he's done, including, the firings at the National Labor Relations Board and at the Federal Mediation Panel. And as I understand, he's basically cleaning house of all of the Trump patronage appointment people, which, again, should have happened day one. But I understand it's a long process, but they are going, and we're getting competent people into those positions who actually believe in the missions of the jobs that they're taking.
Absolutely. I was really, really pleased to see the changes that he's making in the labor agencies. And also he's making moves to reshape the Post Office Board of Governors, which would be the first step to getting Louis DeJoy out of there.
Yeah, the fact that he's still there and he's not in the jail is a problem for me.
Yeah, well, the Postal Service unfortunately has some pretty strong tenure protections that make it impossible for a president to remove a postmaster general directly. However, the president can indirectly remove the postmaster general by making appointments to the Board of Governors, and that seems to be what Biden's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, I want people who are competent, and this is where, I had a lot of conversations during the Trump years of moving away from strong union protections for workers and moving to agencies who, at will do whatever they want. instead of having career bureaucrats doing these jobs who are competent, I never want to go back to the days of patronage. I never want to go back to the wild swings in competency that you have from one administration to another in what our government does. I believe in good governance. I believe in actually getting things done. And for me, the civil service system that we have is, for now, the best system that we have. And I think we have to keep that and strengthen it on a whole bunch of different levels.
I couldn't agree more, Rick. It was a long, hard struggle to get rid of the patronage system in the second half of the 19th century. There were a number of presidents in both parties who worked on that issue and ultimately managed to create a much better system. I mean, I think that was the Citizens United of their time.
No, absolutely, without question. And it's one of those things that I think we don't think enough about because we were in this moment. And I know a lot of people who work in government. And I've spoken to people who work in EPA and other agencies, and the number of good people who just said, you know what, I'm out of here, and left. In OSHA and MSHA and all of these different regulatory bodies, was scary, and revamping that up during a global pandemic is going to be a difficult undertaking. But I'm glad that we're getting the cancers out.
I completely agree.
So last question I've got for you, because you wrote a story today that just made me laugh. Evidently, I grew up in Cleveland, as you probably know. Stark County, Canton, where the Football Hall of Fame is just down the road, maybe 45 minutes, an hour away. But always has been kind of off the beaten path. The county has bought some Dominion voting machines, and the people are losing their minds. Tell me it's true.
It certainly is. So the officials in Stark County, I mean, there's a lot of Republicans there, as you can imagine. It's not exactly a place that's friendly for Democrats, but they understand that these machines are a great deal and that they work really well. And that the conspiracy theories about the flipping votes are completely baseless. I mean, in fact, if you look at pretty much all the places in swing states where Dominion voting machines were used, I mean, they almost all back Trump anyway. So this idea that has been circulating in these fever swamps of the right, that there's some sort of secret foreign plot by Dominion to rig elections, is just utter nonsense. And that's why their lawsuits against all these officials, they should be very worried about that.
Yeah, I saw this and I said, Exhibit A, Your Honor. Look at what Rudy Giuliani and the Trump clown car has done to this brand. You've got angry Fox News voters who are beyond themselves that their county actually bought these machines. This is, I think, all you need to go, this is why these companies have been so badly harmed.
Absolutely.
Going to be interesting as all this plays out, especially when these lawsuits come and are front and center. But Matthew, I appreciate the time. Great work you do over there at RawStory. I hope people will check it out, rawstory.com. We'll get links out on how you can do that. But thanks so much. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much, Rick. And I just want to give a shout out to my wife who's listening to me 2 time zones over. I love you, babester. We'll see each other soon.
There you go. Good stuff, Matthew. Appreciate the time. But here again, like I said, the reality, Exhibit A. I can't wait to see Rudy. I can't wait to see Rudy defend himself. I think that's going to be fun. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.